G'day, welcome back to another exciting round of Who Builds Wins. This episode we're focusing on getting the last of our insurance list done because that's starting to drag out, and it's brought to you by Squarespace. I have a coil of rope, and another one, and another one, and another one. I need to make some mooring ropes out of these. The theory's pretty simple, right? These big mongrel sized ropes are quite heavy and they get pretty tiring when you're throwing them from one boat across to a wharf, etc., and you've got a few of them to do, and then you've got to haul them back in and all that sort of stuff. So the way that we deal with it, and this came straight from the surveyor, is have a small throwing rope and then that's linked to a larger rope. So small throwing rope in our case is just going to be a piece of 8mm double braid, something simple. Doesn't have to be super strong, it just has to basically get the rope across the shore. This is pretty common on large boats like ships and things. They'll tie a weight at one end, normally it's a ball of rope, sometimes called a monkey's fist, and that's a simple way of basically getting some kinetic energy so you can fling it like a lasso, fire it across to a wharf, and then you start passing the big rope down from the boat across to the land. Now obviously there's a difference between, say, a large ship and Brupeg. Brupeg's not a large ship by any means. We're a small trawler basically in the scheme of things, large private boat. So our ropes aren't excessive. However, in saying all of that, we're both like, you know, Jess can't necessarily throw anything heavy, and if I don't have to throw something heavy, why would I? So we're going to try and make this as easy as we can so that the rest of the crew aren't going to struggle either when we come to docking up. This is our 8mm, it's just double braid, black, UV sort of rated, not really crash hot, but UV rated stuff. This is going to be our throwing rope. Doesn't have to be super strong, just has to get the mooring lines across. So what I want to do, this is a piece of 30-meter length. I'm just going to lop this in half, and then I'll have a couple of 15-meter throwing ropes, and then we'll start joining them on to our big stuff. I've tied it onto the bench, so this will help me uncoil it across the yard.
I've said it many times.
I can go with 4 throwing ropes actually.
I would change my ways, I know for sure.
Right. Done. Now that we've got 4 different coils, we have to deal with this fraying. So this is pretty standard whenever you cut double braid or any sort of like inner core rope, like outer core, inner core. This is the strength, this is the UV protection essentially, and like helps it grip on winches and so on. They're independent of each other, so they can slide. I can't really show you one-handed, but they can basically slide independent of each other. If you've ever cut this type of rope, you'll know exactly what I mean. You can burn the ends and seal it over like that, but in my experience this does break down over time. There is a simple trick that I have seen used a few times, and I thought it was absolutely genius when I first saw it, and I can't take credit for it, but I'll show you what it is. Heat shrink. Literally put this on the ends and it stops it from chafing, stops it from like separating and stops it from coming apart. It's awesome. I'll show you it in action. This coil of rope, one of these used to be the mooring rope on our old yacht, and I made these maybe 10 years ago when we started mooring the boat. And that's it, look at that. That's been there for 10 years. Burnt the end, you can sort of see. I did that with the heat gun at the time, but I've also put heat shrink over top of the 3-strand. So there's no need to splice it. You don't need to join it like with a splice like that. Heat shrink here as well. I must have done that back in the day. But it's a simple wee thing and it works really, really well. There is a trick to doing it right though, and it comes down to the type of heat shrink that you buy. Okay, so there's 2 main types of heat shrink. There's this stuff here, which is sort of quite stiff. It's also relatively thick for what it is. This is glue impregnated or resin impregnated, and it has a 2-to-1 shrink ratio. So you don't have a huge amount of shrink room to work with, but it glues itself on to whatever it is that you're shrinking it onto. So whether it's wire, terminal, rope, whatever, it basically resins itself onto it. So it stays on there. The other is this cheap stuff that you get from like car parts, retailers, that sort of thing. This is like, it works, but it's not really that great. It's really thin. It doesn't have resin in it, and it has a 3-to-1 shrink ratio, so it's relying on like shrinking down really tight onto something to stay on. It doesn't actually, you know, if it comes loose it's just going to fall off, and that's why this is better, because it glues itself onto the rope. You get this from like say electrical wholesalers. You buy it in like meter long strips and then cut it up to whatever length you need, versus this oftentimes comes on a roll at the car sales shops and things like that. You can just buy it by the meter but on a big roll. This stuff is okay, but it's not much better than electrical tape. This stuff is the bee's knees, quite a bit more expensive. Like, it's all relative. It's, I don't know, a couple of bucks, $10, something like that for a meter. But yeah, hands down, best stuff you'll find. Because irony is awesome, that's the size that I need to do this rope. So I'm going to leave those and then do a trip into town afterwards for them. These are our mooring ropes. We've got 2 large and 1 small, and then lengthwise The small one is about roughly half the length of the other two. So I'm not going to cut these, I'm going to keep them at the same length, but I do want to splice a large eye into them and get rid of the thimble that's down the other end. Right, time for some thanks. Mick and Julie, you guys have sent us an awesome splicing fid. Let me show you guys what this is. If you've not seen a splicing fid before, it allows you to do this, create splices in stranded rope. So in this case it's 3-strand nylon. What it actually is, this is handmade by the way. So this is a piece of stainless steel pipe that's been cut into a specific shape. That's actually recycled from an old winery pipe. And this here is a piece of Oregon that's been spun down, and there's a very Aussie specific coin tapped in the end of it, which is pretty bloody cool. Brupeg 21, limited edition obviously. That's coming with us for some time. What this allows you to do is actually create these sorts of joins. So this is a rope that's been basically folded back onto itself and knitted in. How a fid works, so you get your strands of rope and you twist it to loosen them up. You can sort of see you create a big gap in there. With the fid in like that, you can then feed rope either way, and it's a real simple way of getting the strands in and out, and you basically work your way around, sticking it in and out of the rope all the way down, basically creating that. And what it allows you to do is having a spliced loop like this, for example, is super strong. It's as strong, if not stronger, than the rope itself. So you're not going to break the splice, you're going to break the rope before you break the splice, but you end up with a really beautiful connection from, you know, one direction to the other without having to have the hassle of a knot. So this is a bloody cool little tool that we're going to keep on board Brupeg, pride of place. So thanks very much, this is really awesome. Cheers guys. These are the 3 ends that I need to deal with. Now normally I'd splice a big loop into these, tie my throwing line onto it so you can pull the big loop straight onto the bollard, but in the interest of time saving, I'm not going to bother splicing this time around. I'm going to do that when the boat's in the water and I've got a quiet moment just to sit there in front of the TV and do the splicing, because it takes a wee bit of time doing some man knitting. For now I'm just going to cut these and put a bit of heat shrink on top of them, and then we're just going to tie a bowline. I get tying a bowline on this isn't the right way of doing it, I get that, and it's, you know, it's not how Captain Cook would have done it and all of that sort of stuff, but you know, I need to get the boat in the water and I can change to splicing later on.
They settled down beneath my feet. I've got it.
Pretty hard on blades doing this.
But I learned my lesson.
Let's seal that up before it spins out of control. Right, come on heat gun, you can do this. I have a little gauge that tells me theoretically how hot this is. I think 600, oh no, it goes higher. You see that? The heat gun is enough to basically melt the nylon inside, shrinks it on there nice and tight. This stuff needs more heat than the 3-to-1 shrink. This is the 2-to-1 resin infused. It needs more heat to shrink, but it's enough heat to actually melt the rope, and that's why it's such an awesome way of doing it. Works really well. I need to make a bowline. I want a big bowline, and I can't remember what the little mnemonic is to make the bowline. I'm assuming it's something like you make a loophole in the tax law, you flip round behind the law, dodge prosecution, and then you're home free. I think that's how it goes. Three mooring lines. Now we just need to tie onto these loops the black throwing line.
Baby, let's just pretend. I want to stay like this forever. I want to stay right here with you. I want to stay right here with you.
The last thing that I want to do on these little 8mm throwing ropes is put a bit of weight at the end of them. And I do that by making a ball. So this is called a monkey's fist, this knot. It's pretty simple. This is a 3-coil monkey fist. It's basically just a bunch of rope that's coiled up together in a ball essentially, and this allows you to essentially do this and then fling it over to the dock. Allows you to get a bit of distance, and then you can start feeding the main ropes out from the boat across to the dock. If you'd like to know how to make one of these, this is a monkey's fist, or as they really should be called, sailing ninja balls, then check out the link in the corner or in the description below. It's a how-to that we've put together so that you can actually see how to do this on your own on any piece of rope. As much as my on-camera workshop doesn't often reflect it, I am a neat freak. Not to the extent of being annoying, definitely not. It's more just that I like things tidy so that I can find them. So when I'm not using ropes for a long time, if I can't tie them up against something or what have you, I'll actually just zip tie them in their coils, because that way I can just chuck them around, get them out of the way, kick them, whatever, and I know that they're not going to basically be a real mess when I go to get them. So I'm going to coil the little one, and then I'm going to coil the big one with mooring lines. 1, 2, 3, completed. Now it's time for something completely different. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Squarespace is an awesome platform if you're looking to build a website of your own. Photos really matter when you're building a website, and Squarespace has a great selection like these photos here. In this day and age where all the cool kids have mobile phones, mobile optimized websites are an awesome way to get your brand out there. Their templates are all mobile optimized, and Squarespace won't leave you in a pickle. These websites look just as good on desktop as they do on tablet and mobile. So if you've got an idea for a website, check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/Project Brupeg and you'll save 10% off your first website or domain. Brupeg needs a secondary anchor in order to get insurance. Every boat needs a secondary anchor, it's just common sense. About a year ago, Tony Patch donated this Danforth. Let me show you what it is. This is a 120-pound Danforth anchor, so it's about 55-60 kg, something like that. They come with a big old, I think it's a 1-inch diameter pin shackle, and we've got a 8mm stainless chain that's going onto this. It does seem like a bit of a mismatch, however there is some method in our madness, so we've got a shackle that fits across this big one. Danforths are an awesome anchor as a secondary because they stow so flat. So you can see here with the shank kind of in its middle position, the anchor itself is only maybe, I don't know, 200mm thick from top to bottom. They're really quite flat. They're quite wide, that's all good, that's easy to deal with, but it's the height that way that makes them easy to stow. So that's what I have to mount on the foredeck of Brupeg today. Danforth anchors are a simple design, but they're really effective in sand, and that's why we want one as our secondary anchor. We're also going to make some on the back corners of the boat so that we can have them as stern anchors as well. So I need to mount that anchor at the front end of Brupeg. I'm actually going to tuck it up onto the side of the bulwarks on the inside of the bow. To do that, I need to make a little bracket to hold the whole thing. I was thinking of using this, some solid 16mm stainless bar. Now I know what you're thinking, and it's a solid line of questioning. The hydrodynamic coefficient of friction is far too low to be used as a mounting point for a galvanized anchor. And I'm with you, but I thought about it. What if we put some rubber pipe on it? So the anchor's leaning up against the IBC, and that's about the orientation that it goes when it's on the boat. You've got this hole here, and you've got another hole just here. What I was thinking is drilling these two out so that they fit this bolt. I think this is 5/8, I believe. I think that's about 16mm, something like that. What I was going to do is weld this head onto the boat, so it'll sit basically like that on the boat, and then that hole there, the anchor can quite literally bolt onto the boat when not in use. Tucks it hard up against the hull so it won't rattle or do anything funny. And to stop chafe and wearing paint off, I'm actually going to put a bit of rubber between the anchor and the bolt itself. Now this end here, to stop the shank from flopping around and making noise, I was going to take the piece of 16mm bar, bend a right angle into it, so go underneath it like that, weld it onto the hull, and then bend this piece vertical like that. So it just acts, gravity will just literally, hold this down in its chock. You can strap it with a bit of rope if you really want to, but to stop it making noise and also wearing out the galvanization, as well as, clanking on the metal, that's why I was thinking put some rubber pipe on it. I've brought the old pipe bender out of retirement, so I put this thing back together, and this is what I'm going to use to bend our 16mm bar. Right, what I'm thinking is measure from this inside edge across and allow for the shank. However, we need to allow for the rubber pipe. So the new, once that's slid over top, the new OD of this shaft, bring it across. I need 60mm minimum to allow for the width of the anchor shank. I'm going to allow a bit more because I don't want it to be bar tight or anything. I want to allow it to actually be a little bit sloppy in there so that I can get it in and out nice and easy. Probably give it 10mm clearance because I've got pipe on one side and I'm going to have a rubber sheet on the other. I'm not worried about it making noise, metal on metal. I'm also not worried about it clanking and wearing off the galvanizing, but because this is going to be used so infrequently, I'll be able to just tie it down as well. I've measured across and I've given myself that 10mm, so we're down to 70mm, that line there. I think the challenge is going to be, once I weld this on, that's all good and well, there's no issue with that, but it's actually sliding this rubber around that radius. It's a pretty tight radius, 32mm radius. I don't know, maybe we heat the rubber and push it on, but either way, we'll see how we go.
If you're in a hurry, you're missing the point. Should enjoy the fruits of life instead of chasing coins.
Whoop whoop. That's going to work perfect. In case you're wondering, this is the rubber that I'm thinking of using between the hull and the actual anchor itself. So it's probably a bit over 6mm, not quite 8mm. Oh, gee, Bob, maybe average it goes 7mm. It's a conveyor belt. This is something we found at the scrapyard and we bought it by the meter. We're going to line our anchor room with it so the chain doesn't destroy the paint, but I'm also going to use this as a way of protecting the paint on the deck from the anchor. I guess it may break, but at least it's going to have a soft landing on the IBC. Right, I reckon we want it on that side so that we've got a bit more room up here because crane's on this side, but also the rope gypsy is going to be on that side on the winch, and although we can't reach it right now with the crane, I'm going to make the crane longer. Good, that's our decision. Clear. Trick that I do whenever I get a circle or something like this marked that I have to then grind is I do a rough center like that, 2 directions, and that way I can flap her out the middle and then just join the lines up. I know I'm pretty close to where I need to go anyway. This isn't super precise. I don't know if that came across in the video or not. We are set to weld. What I'm going to do, I've cleaned the 2 areas that I need to weld in. I'm going to bolt this in because it's on a bit of a funny angle, so I'll bolt it into the back of this, sit it where I want it, and then just tack it and then take this off. Okay, turns out I'm not doing it that way. With the anchor in position, if you come down here, when that sort of roughly sits where it needs to sit, when the bolt's on, I can't actually physically get around the back anyway to weld it up. So what I'm going to do, just slide it off to the side, put a single tack in, and then adjust the angle with the anchor, put it on and adjust the angle and everything, and then just take the whole thing off and weld it properly. The other end isn't anywhere near as critical, it's easy to access. So that weld sounded a little bit full on, and I didn't really realise, but the welder had been bumped to maximum volts. So this is my welding tip. Maybe a wee bit hard to tell, but that weld was probably 80% 309 wire and the rest of it was welding tip. As ugly as that is, it ain't coming off. So I'll give that a quick clean up with a grinder once we're done. time to get this front one done. I went to weld this on there, and there's a bit of a gap, so I'm going to put it down this end. The welder that I'm using is my Unimig 205. It's an awesome welder. I'm really chuffed with it. When I first bought it a long time ago, there was an issue with the software and they reprogrammed it, and apparently it was actually a setting they use in Europe, not in Aussie, New Zealand, America, etc. Whereas when you pull the trigger, it inches the wire out really, really slowly until it contacts the metal and then starts feeding it at the rate you tell it to. It's really, you get used to it, but it's infuriating when you first use it. You don't understand why it's doing it. Apparently it's a common thing that they just reprogram them in Aussie to just get rid of it, and they did that on mine. It was awesome. Recently the circuit board died on our machine and we got it replaced, and it's doing the inching the wire thing. So they obviously didn't upgrade that software, whatever that part of it is. They didn't change that this time round, and for some reason it's basically burning the wire back into the tip. Even when I have the settings really down low, it's still doing the same thing. So I think I'll probably have to just take it back in and get them just to blip the software, do whatever it was that they did last time, and get it back to running normal. All right, we should be able to throw it on its mounts now. One. Oh, you know what I've done? I fucking welded them too far apart. You stupid penis. You Alright, start that again. One. For the welders out there, it's basically doing spray transfer with not a lot of volts, and I've got the wire speed quite high to try and compensate, but yeah, doing weird things. Alright, now we need to let that cool down. We need to put rubber pipe on it. Let's go get the chain.
I wanna close my eyes and go back, play it in my mind. A movie of us two, yeah, we were happy at the time. Can't remember what it felt like. We used to be so strong. That picture perfect sky now, it looks so great cold. We've been playing here since 4 a.m. and you haven't said a word to me. Silent treatment, is this what it feels like when your heart...
Right, with some rubber, I think that's going to be alright. I was thinking this here is probably going to clank, but what I was thinking is some sort of strap like bungee or something like that tied to that, and then pulled off to the side or whatever, holding a bit of tension on it so that it's sort of away from any metal. I don't know, it may not work. It'd probably take a couple of goes to figure it out, but it's not the end of the world. We're going to be on the boat for 10 years, I reckon we'll do it. Right, that's mounted up and bolted. I'm going to let that cool down, and then I'll sort of clean off the welds and things like that. I need to size up the rubber plate that I want to put behind everything, so you can sort of see it sits off the deck. That right down there low, that's off the deck by about 1 inch. It's, well, not tight, but it is bolted, and you can see if I go right over the top, there you go, you can sort of see it will hang off the boat slightly because you've got the distance of the bolt head, whatever the width of that bolt head is. But the rubber is also quite thick, so I'm thinking the rubber is going to take up a lot of that distance. These flukes don't actually hit the hull itself, or the top one doesn't, the bottom one looks like it is. But when I put the rubber in, I'm hoping that that will resolve that, and when that's tightened, it'll potentially straighten up a bit more. Worst case, I can always put a bit like a pad of stainless behind each end. This end here, I'm thinking is going to be if anything's going to rattle, it'll be this end here. And that's why I was thinking of putting the rubber pipe on this stainless here. Probably cut this down yay high, it doesn't have to be this high. I'll probably cut this down to say here, put the rubber pipe on it. I'm hoping that's going to stop some of the noise as well transferring through. This is the layout that I need to create, basically a rectangle with some funny angles in the corners so that we get the angle right on the hull. I use this angulometer that was donated by Trev. This thing's basically a digital protractor. It's bloody awesome. Saves so much time on board. The rubber that we're using is conveyor belt. It's a reinforced rubber. You can sort of see there's like a fibre layer, and then on the underside you've got a pretty harsh sort of fibre layer. I'm guessing that's where the rollers grab onto, but on the top it's nice and smooth. No idea what these were used for, but this stuff's relatively easy to cut with a just a straight craft knife blade. I'll measure this up and I'll show you how to do it. The trick to cutting this stuff, I've just got a regular old blade. You want to get all the way through the reinforcing. Helps to use a new blade while you're doing this. Once you're through like that, you then want to basically pull back and pull up at the same time. And see, it's basically cutting the reinforcing. The rubber's pretty easy to cut, it's the reinforcing that's the hard bit. You can cut this belt with a regular old drill. Doesn't leave a perfect edge, but let me show you what it comes up like. This is a 25mm drill bit. You sort of see there, you're left with a wee bit of fluff around there. I don't think it's going to matter for our application. We just want to push this rubber over top of the bolt that we welded on. Hence I need a big hole like this. Very precise. I'm going to cut that one and then I'm going to figure out where that one sits. Lovely.
I've been in your waters, been knocking at your door.
That'll do. I think we found the technique. There you have it, installed. We have our rubber pipe. I managed to get that all the way down. You can see it going hard up against the rubber there. This here is sort of coiled up as a big ball of chain, and then I've just got that strapped up to the handrail at the moment. I'll probably come up with a better solution for that, but for now that'll do. We have our rubber behind. Everything is basically protected by rubber now, and the bolt, although it's not tightened up, the bolt basically threads go right the way up, so we can nip that up nice and tight. Some people have asked, why are we using stainless chain? Stainless is not as good as galvanized for anchor chain, and that's absolutely true. It doesn't give you any warning when it's going to break. However, this anchor is going to be used so infrequently that rust is going to kill it before overloading it kills it. And that's also partly why we're going with 8mm chain. We don't have to have 16mm chain like our main anchor here in order to use our secondary anchor. We just have to have some chain, which is chafage protection across the bottom for like coral and things like that. So for us, this is a good compromise. We can easily hook this anchor onto our 16mm chain if we ever needed to, but for now we actually have a second road just using the stainless chain and then hooking it on to a very long length of nylon rope. A lot of people get nervous when you start talking about having rope on your anchor road. A lot of cruisers prefer all chain. I'm in that camp. I prefer all chain myself, and our main anchor and chain and everything is basically 100% chain, just with a swivel between the chain and the anchor and straight onto the chain gypsy. A lot of trawlers are actually moving to rope and chain, mainly because it's lighter and cheaper to replace whenever they have to, recertify it or go through any sort of certification processes to make sure it's safe. Cruisers and recreational boats don't have anywhere near as many rules applied to them, and therefore they can kind of get away with a lot of stuff that wouldn't necessarily you wouldn't be able to get away with in the commercial world. I like having all rope and chain because I know that when I put the chain down, it's not going to get caught on a coral bommy or something and then basically rip and then the boat's floating free. Chain, even though it's harsher on the bottom, it's safer overall for the boat. The difference being with this little guy here, I'm happy to have rope on that because that's a secondary anchor, and it's, we're not anchoring like with that thing for days and days at a time. It's basically if something happens to the main anchor and we desperately need another, this is what we're going to be using, hence the rope component in this road.
I don't normally wear a safety hat when I'm editing. It's not that dangerous, but thank you Tony, who dropped in just a couple of days ago. Tony's a local here, and he knows all about safety, and he gave me this. I don't know if you can see it there, but it has sort of a safety thing on the inside. So it's actually it's really hard, but soft on the inside, which is perfect. Thank you, Tony. I'm sorry to have missed you, and hopefully we'll see you over the holidays. Tony said that he might drop in and give us a hand, which would be awesome. And thank you, Dave and Dawn, particularly you, Dawn, for your surprise donation. It's astounding. Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your support. It's amazing.